getting started, I was talking with Sarah and Carolyn and Lindsay, and we were talking about how this feels sort of like a celebratory close look session because we're coming to the end of this year and coming to the end of this semester. And so I hope everyone has had a chance to go and grab something to drink. I have got my Pinot Noir. And so the Close Looks Project, what we're doing here in focusing on select few objects is really conceptualizing artworks as ways of expressing and grappling with identities that span the spectrum of race and gender and ethnicity. And so with this program, they're going to get a taste of how we've been teaching university class sessions at the Ackland over Zoom. And so in those sessions, we encourage students to sit with the art, to look closely at it, to listen as their peers and other participants describe their perspectives on what they see. So that's what we're going to do today. And Lindsay, will you pull up maybe just the first image? We're going to be looking today at Barton Lidis's Talisman. This is a work from 1994. But since this will be very much a conversation and really sort of be participatory, we're going to be sharing perspectives, I want to take just a moment to go around and briefly introduce ourselves. You've already heard from Lindsay, but I'll call on your boxes and maybe you can just say your name. So Sarah, will you go first?
Sure, I'm Sarah Farkas. I'm a graduate student in the art history department, and I work with Erin at the Ackland this year.
Yes. Carolyn.
Hi, I'm Carolyn Almendinger, and I work at the Ackland too.
Wonderful. And Marie, do you want? Yes. Would you like to?
Okay. All right. I'm on. I'm Marie Gadd, and I was a docent at the Ackland, and now I'm just partaking in the lectures, and I'm also a member of the Ackland.
Great, wonderful. Catherine Clark. There's two Catherines.
Hi, Catherine. I'm just a art lover and a UNC alum, and just drew me in when you said you could look really close. I was like, oh yes, I like to look close. That's terrific. So thanks. I'm kind of cooking dinner, so I'm probably going to leave my video off because I'm up and down a lot.
Totally fine. Welcome.
Okay.
Catherine Reeve.
Okay. Yeah. Hi. Yeah, I was having a hard time with my computer. My name's Catherine Reeve. I live in Raleigh, and I was just drawn to this presentation because it's not something I'm familiar with. I work at NC State in a unit that helps with research grant proposals, so very different from what we're doing tonight. So just wanted to see what you all were doing over at the Ackland.
Wonderful, thank you.
And I am Charlene. I'm sorry, and I have my brother is an artist. I grew up helping him in New York in his art studio, and art has always interested me.
Wonderful, great. So thank you all so much for coming. So please, as we're having this conversation, feel free to unmute yourself at any time. But first thing we're going to do, we're going to look closely at this object, at Lidis's Talisman. And I want you to look at this image. And we're going to take maybe 15 seconds or so, 30 seconds or so to just look at the image. And then we'll talk about it. So now just look. And we're getting sort of an overview of the image now as we see it, but I have a close-up image. Lindsay, will you go to the next image? So now you can look a little bit closer. So what do you see?
Originally, I thought it was beads, and now it looks like some kind of pharmaceutical medicine,
Yeah.
and that's attached, that's white with the blue lines across it.
Yeah.
And the dollar bills. Mhm.
Dollar bills. Where do you see the dollar
Yep.
bill?
In the circle, and then the thing that that looks like where they tie together. Yeah.
Mhm. Good. So you're noticing there are things that look like bees, Catherine Reeve pointed out, that appear upon closer inspection to be perhaps pills. And then the material that's connecting those pill beads all together appears to be dollar bills. And then we also have this shape in the center. Good. What else do you see?
I'm sort of struck by the fact that one of the things that I'm noticing is that it looks really tactile. I mean, and I think, like once you start thinking about, medications, or, I don't know, I mean, maybe it's the dollars and medications are things that you touch, but also the texture of the paper is just, I mean, as somebody, I work in a museum, I shouldn't want to touch the art, but it's just feeling like irresistibly tactile.
Yeah, I wonder, what is it about the shape of those beads, pills? What is it about the shape of those that makes you want to touch them?
I think it's like the way the light is reflecting, and it just sort of, I mean, I can sort of imagine the texture,
Mhm.
So that it looks really smooth, and, I'm thinking about what the texture of money feels like, and
Yeah.
yeah.
I agree with Carolyn. There's something really luminous about like each of those little pills / beads on all of them. One of the first things I noticed was sort of just how much white is going on here. The background is white, the pills are white, there's white in the dollar bills, even though they're mostly green. But you get a sense of, yeah, there are different textures going on that differentiates them. There's a texture to the paper. It's not a really smooth, glossy paper, whereas the pills are quite glossy looking. So yeah, there is something about sort of the monochromaticness of it is allowing you to notice the differences in texture.
That's a great point, Sarah. Yeah, there's something about the materiality of both the money and the pills that draws you in. And Benes has chosen to mount this talisman, the artwork is called Talisman, on a piece of white paper, a matte piece of white paper. And we'll talk more about Benes's work later, but that mounting of works and items onto paper like that is something that Benes does commonly. Good. Do you notice anything else? Other things that you see? Yeah, Catherine Reeve, yes.
Originally, when I saw it, I just noticed the increments of 3 at the top, and then I realized it, as it goes down, it increases in the numbers of the groups.
Great. Yeah. Do other people see that there seems to be
Yes.
increase? Yeah, as you go around the shape. Good.
The thing that I noticed, I'm Marie, is the tie. It's a V shape and it looks very much like a wishbone from a chicken that's been wrapped, and so maybe that has something to do with it.
Great.
Yeah.
Marie, you're absolutely right. And all of you are spot on in your identification of what these items are. Lindsay, will you go to the next slide that has our label information? Great. So you can see that this is made from a wishbone, as Marie correctly identified, from AZT pills, and from US currency. So does anyone have any association with AZT pills? Does anyone know what AZT is?
No.
It's sort of an obscure reference. Yeah. So AZT, Barton started incorporating AZT and also his own blood and also other items associated with HIV and AIDS into his practice when he himself tested HIV positive in the early 90s. And AZT was the first antiviral or retroviral that was put on the market, that was approved by the FDA. It was manufactured by a company called Burroughs Wellcome. So he started incorporating these materials, pills and capsules and intravenous tubes, also the cremated human remains of his friends who had died from AIDS, into his practice as he himself was progressing in his diagnosis. So AZT, though, for years was the only hope, and it was a drug that was pushed through the approval process for the FDA. And it was notoriously expensive. And so there are questions about the quickness of the approval process and the efficacy of AZT, but also questions about what Burroughs Wellcome was doing and the ethics of charging what was a great deal of money for an already vulnerable population. So knowing now about what AZT is, more about the cultural connections of the material that he's using and that he's foregrounding this piece, are there any further observations or associations that come to mind as you look at this?
I'm wondering about what the dosages were.
Yeah.
That's what I'm thinking. Yeah.
Yeah.
Start
Yeah.
out with 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great question, Carolyn. And it reminds me of teaching. I taught this once before, and the students in that session also were curious about, well, wow, if this medicine costs so much money, is it wasteful that that Benes is using it in his artwork? And further, how many of these pills is he taking each day? Well, Benes took an ever-evolving cocktail of HIV and AIDS drugs, anti and retrovirals, up to the point of his diagnosis to his eventual death. So the dosage changed for him over time, but he has said that it's a different number of pills that you take at different points in the week. So one could read, Marie's, I think it was either Marie or Catherine's observation, there's a pattern, seems to be a pattern to the number of pills as you're going around the talisman. Perhaps that might have something to do with dosage. Sarah, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it's also sort of reminiscent of like pill rationing as well. If you don't have enough, it's incredibly expensive and you can't afford enough dosage, the idea that you might need to take 6 pills, but as you're getting to the end of the week, and you can't afford more, you might start splitting it up into dosages of 3 or 4 to try to stretch your supply.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't have the exact number on hand, but the cost per week in 1994 for a week's worth of AZT pills was something like $390. So that, that's pretty steep. It's pretty expensive. And not only did pill rationing happen with AZT in the HIV positive community, but also the saving of pills from various drug trials would happen. So people would hope that they weren't assigned a placebo in a drug trial, and they would keep the pills so that they might use them and distribute them later. Yeah. Other associations or observations that come to mind thinking about the AZT pill used in this work?
The wishbone makes me think of hope. Or sometimes with the wishbone, you have 2 people on either side that are vying for control over who has the bigger piece from it. So I don't know.
Great. Yeah, I was going to ask Catherine, well, how do we use a wishbone? And you're right, growing up in Thanksgiving, in my home at least, we would, my brother and I would hold each side, and whoever got the bigger side, their wish would come true. So I wonder then, thinking about the association of the wishbone with hope, with wishes granted, and also with that kind of family ritual, what connections come to your mind about the association of AZT and the wishbone.
Like hope that it's going to work, hope that it's, you know, I mean, if it's the first drug, then there isn't a whole lot of precedent for, you know, oh, this is a next generation, a statin drug or something like that. Like, so it would be a new territory.
Yeah. Hope that it's going to work. Yeah.
I just see it as as a world hope, you know, because AIDS was all over the world. And this is a wish and a hope for a cure for AIDS for all over the world. The circle to me represents the world.
Yeah.
And I just see it as people holding hands together all over the world.
Yeah, you know, Charlene, you're absolutely right. Like, and this idea of a global perspective of the importance of global artifacts was crucial to Benes's practice. Another thing that he's known for is collecting. He was a conceptual and contemporary artist, but then took a trip to Africa and got really into the aesthetics of African art and the way that African contemporary artists and also traditionally in West African art, objects are recycled. Objects have a material power. There's a power imbued in the materiality of objects. And he was really interested in that. So he started collecting global art and specifically African art. And he also, later in his practice, he started to create what are called reliquaries. And he also had a set of projects where he would create mini museums that were dedicated to things that might otherwise be thrown away. So artifacts from like pop culture and Hollywood would be side by side with human bones and also religious icons. So he was really interested in the practice of collecting and really interested in connecting things that might not otherwise be connected, you know, as Charlene points out, a sort of global perspective. So knowing that a little bit about his collecting practices, his interest in display and in museums, what do you make of, again, of the materials that he's chosen to juxtapose here? The AZT pills, the wishbone, and also the money that's wrapped around.
Well, this isn't one of the three you just mentioned, but I was looking at the paper again that he mounted it on, and it makes me, the frayed edges make me think a little bit of a scrapbook. Like when you were talking about collecting, that was one of the things. And the fact that there was like a sign and a date, like my mom, like back in the day, used to write, you know, on the back of the Kodak, you know, pictures, like the location and the year. So I guess, I know that's not what you're asking us to look at, but it's just a thought.
Yeah. You're totally right. Yeah. Noticing the paper, even the paper has a significance. Yeah. So again, thinking about the juxtaposition of materials here and what Benes is doing is kind of a museum or museological practice of juxtaposing objects, putting them together, and ascribing value to them. I mean, we've already heard that the AZT pills were very dear, and also they were hoped to be something that might help in the battle against AIDS. What do we make of the other material juxtapositions here?
Just going to throw this out there when you're talking about West African culture, and you can dispel it if I'm wrong, but thinking of like shamanism or magical qualities and things, and chickens or birds may be used in certain rituals, or you know, that kind of like mystical kind of aspect of things. And what do you think about that? Okay.
I think that's a great observation. In fact, this is called talisman. What do we think of when we hear the word talisman? What is a talisman?
I think of a rabbit's foot.
Mm,
So something that I think maybe you hold on to, it's supposed to be tactile, but that it's supposed to bring you good luck or good fortune, maybe.
Yeah.
But I will say the shape was not what I expected when I heard the word talisman, because I think of it as something small and that you hold in your hand, you put in your pocket. Although this could be small. I don't know. I guess there's the dimensions. I couldn't tell. But anyway.
It's spread out. It's about 13 by 12 inches. So, it's something that you could hold in your hand if it's not mounted, but it is a bit larger. Oh, Carolyn,
Like rosary beads.
Sorry?
Like rosary beads.
Say more about that.
Well, it suddenly sort of reminded me, my mother-in-law just died, and we got a lot of her rosaries and put in her belongings, and just, because I wasn't raised Catholic, and so I'm less familiar with it, but like sort of the numbers of beads strung together, the number of times that you say this prayer or that prayer. Yeah. Anyway, that's a different kind of thing, but anyway, it just sort of flashed into my mind. But it could be something that either you'd hold in your hand or maybe that you'd wear around your neck.
Mm-hmm. And with your comment and with Catherine's comment, I'm reminded again of Charlene's observation that this feels like something that is global, that's bringing together kind of global perspectives. Your comparison perhaps of rosary beads, the idea that the wishbone may be a reference to usage of animal parts to impart some sort of good luck or good fortune in West African religions and in now diasporic African religions. Those to me seem very connected. What else about this work and its use of material and its juxtapositions of material might also impart that kind of sense of the global, or a global, something that is a global sort of material?
Money. Money makes the world go round, doesn't it?
Yeah, say what, well, tell us more. What makes you say that, Catherine? Say more about it. Yeah.
Unfortunately, in times like this, where you're saying, reminding us that this was the first drug available for the AIDS virus, it's like who gets to benefit from it, similar to what we may be going through in this current pandemic. Like, who can afford the vaccination to get well? Anyone who's sick should have that ability, but what does it take to get that?
Yeah, it's looking at this, it's almost impossible to not think about the situation that we're in now, where we have a scientific process that the scientists have gone to heroic ends to create some sort of solution and to create a system of solutions. And yet we're very uncertain about how the process of distribution will play out and what the global effects will be. And AIDS, because it's another virus, provides an interesting historical parallel, a way to see like how is our situation different now and how is it similar. What else about money lends a sense of the global?
I will say it's U.S. money specifically. So there could be something there about that U.S. is really in charge of the world economy, the world drug economy. It could be something, or that we have the privilege of having these things when other parts of the world don't, with the U.S. and the drugs together. But yeah, it is specifically the U.S. dollar.
Yeah. And I should say also at this point that so Benes, in addition to working with sort of miniature museums of artifacts that he had collected, and also with what he called reliquaries, he also started to in the late 90s and early 2000s work with currencies, both US currencies and world currencies. He received something like, he got a grant from he got a federal grant, and he received bags of shredded money from the Treasury. And I'm sure, you know, this is money that was old and had been taken out of circulation, but he received this money to create art. And some of this money you see here, but he also created other material objects out of currency. So he's kind of taking, you know, the abstraction of the dollar, the abstraction of currency, and making something very real and very concrete with it. You know, what further associations, you know, knowing that working with money was part of his practice, does that tell you anything different? Or does that raise any new thoughts or observations about this object?
I mean, one of the things I noticed when we were looking at the close-ups, and Catherine Clark's comment is reminding me of this, is the direct call out of the United States in that Wishbone, where he's purposely placed the money so that you can read the country name there, and sort of like there just seemed to be an element of an appeal directly to government, which not only controls the supply of money and the printing of the money, but then has a really large role to play in the supply and approval of this drug, and possibly even a role to play in the regulation of its price, were it incentivized to do that. So there seems to be an element of using the money to appeal to government in the way that money stands for government power.
Mm-hmm. It's a really, yeah, interesting comment, Sarah. You know, phrased that way, it seems like such a literal critique. Other thoughts?
I don't know that this is really necessarily associated, but I've been listening to some things recently, and one of the speakers keeps talking about the fact that we place so much value on money, but money is literally just paper. And so like you said, like this was just paper that was shredded. It was going to be thrown away. It is worthless. It is worth nothing. Yet look at all the value that's placed on it when we put it on this paper. When we see this, we think of the value of that, but really it is just a piece of paper. But those drugs have a lot of value, and there is value in those because they can make you well. So it's like these, one thing is worthless and the other thing has so much worth, yet they're almost valued equally on that piece of paper.
That's so well put, Catherine. Yes, there's an ambiguity to currency. There's an ambiguity there. Is it the most, is it the thing of most value in the world, or is it absolutely meaningless? And we might relate that ambiguity to AZT and to the science behind AZT, which was shown once it was distributed to the early HIV positive populations to be really damaging to some people. So there's a sense in which AZT has that same sort of ambiguity, that same sort of, I'm not sure if it's something of great worth or something that's totally valueless or has negative value.
That's such an interesting comment too, Catherine, because I'm thinking also about how the AZT pill is sort of read as like pearls or beads, like at the beginning when we're looking at it really zoomed out, and sort of the hierarchy of material in jewelry making. Your material to make your chain or your necklace is not really necessarily usually the focus of a necklace. It's a means to an end to display whatever kinds of beads or pearls or whatever you're trying to string together. And so, yeah, it's really interesting that the money here is, which we would normally think of as, you know, top tier in terms of value, is sort of following that pattern of hierarchy of material in the way you would make jewelry as well.
Such an excellent point, Sarah, and thank you for that, because we think about certain gemstones and materials and metals as being dear, and we don't necessarily think of paper and plastic as being dear. And there's also a global hierarchy of materials made to use jewelry that's coming into play here too. What we might find valuable in the West might not be something that is, or we might find something that is something that in West Africa is valuable is not so valuable here, or vice versa. Yeah, great point. Again, getting back to Charlene's comment about the global perspectives on value and assignations of value. Yeah.
I want to just mention too, going back to the Wishbone again, the ribbons, that were worn and they're still worn today. That meaning about the AIDS were just fashioned like that, and they were all over at the time, they were on Christmas trees and used a lot. So it's another symbol for the necklace.
I had forgotten about that.
It just came to me. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great observation. Really excellent point. And that reminds me, Marie, I hadn't put this together either, but Benes also did work kind of honoring the AIDS ribbon, but also critiquing it. So, honoring it as a symbol of visibility, but also critiquing that someone could wear an AIDS ribbon and yet that could have no material effect on the condition of people who are actually suffering from AIDS. So again, there's that ambiguity. Is this something of value or is it worthless? Yeah. Other thoughts, other observations? One thing that I am thinking about having this conversation is also I can't help but think of the place and the role of the museum in conditioning how we ascribe value to certain objects and also to works created by certain people. The museum has so much to do, and of course Benes recognized this in his work. It has so much to do with how we ascribe value to materials and to objects. But also I think, the critique of his work is that the museum and other cultural institutions have so much to do with how we ascribe value to people. Because that's one thing that's sort of underneath all his works that are so artifactual, is that there's people sort of underneath and a critique about how we ascribe value to people that I think is so interesting. Other thoughts, other observations as we look at this?
I like the way that it's displayed too, it isn't very colorful so that it shows up more just on the white background.
Yeah.
Nothing to take away from it.
Yeah, again, thinking about those museum conditions that Benes is kind of mimicking here. Yeah. Catherine, were you going to say something? No? Okay.
Very similar to what Marie was talking about, the color scheme. Yeah, that was what I was thinking about next. But when we're looking at it this close, we're just seeing the white pills on the white background. But when you had it larger, we had the different layers of the paper underneath. I don't know what the symbolism is for that.
Yeah, will you go to that larger image, Lindsay? Yeah, so we can see the paper that's mounted on, which you can see that's Benes's handwriting down at the bottom. So, he's labeling it for us. Yeah. So we get a sense that it's been mounted here purposefully. It's something that, he made to be collected. And there's also, a sense looking at it that he's made these kind of immaterial concepts and experiences. So fear and hope and wishing, capital with the money, like the science and the data and research that goes into producing medicines with the pills. He's made all of these kind of immaterial conceptual things that can be hard to grasp in a holistic sense. He's made all of those material, and as Carolyn pointed out at the very beginning, he's made them tactile. Tactile in a sense.
Yes, yeah.
It's interesting you're going to see it in this size again with the reminder of how big it is, like about the size that it is, because it's actually quite reminiscent of a clock as well when you're looking at the whole of it, with the change of the numbers all around the circle, like a clock, an analog clock would have going around it, and then sort of the themes of time that are sort of implicit in this as well, like the ritual of daily pill taking. You take it at a certain time, you take it for a certain number of days. We've all seen those plastic containers with the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday labels on them. And also like time running out as well.
Yeah.
As your money is running out, so is your time.
Yeah. And the amount of time someone has is dependent upon the worth accorded to them in a particular society. I think that's a great point, Sarah. I also hadn't considered too, time is money. and time in a very like real visceral sense here, and time too is an abstraction. Time is very difficult to grasp tactilely unless you kind of feel it as your body is changing. Other thoughts, other observations, connections? I do want to show, since we have the image, Lindsay, will you show the close up of the AZT pill? Yeah, we have an image of it in its case.
There's the Burroughs Welcome logo.
Yeah.
Right.
So you can see what it looks like close up. Well, any other thoughts or observations as we close? We have just a couple of minutes left. Yeah, I just want to thank you all. I mean, we're coming to the end of this conversation. It's been really good, and I feel like really positive, even though we're talking about some difficult subjects. But I really think Benes's work is so brilliant and can tell us a lot about how we ascribe value in our society, how we ascribe value to certain people, how do we make determinations about who gets access to resources, who gets access to life, who is worth grieving, who do we consider material in the sense of material as important. And so I want to thank you all for your observations and your thoughts. I hope that we can continue these conversations next semester and to the point where we'll be able to experience each other materially again and not mediated through a screen. So thank you all so much for your time and for sharing a glass of wine.
And thank you
so much for having it.
Thank you.
Really fun.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Erin. And that was her final public program before she starts her winter break. And as she mentioned, we will be hosting spring 2021 iterations of Close Looks, looking at other objects in the Ackland's collection that touch on identities of all kinds. So please pay attention to our calendar, sign up for our e-news, and that way you can find out about when you can hang out with us and enjoy a cocktail and look closely at art.
Okay.
So thank you so much for joining us, and have a great rest of your evening.
Have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
And
See you next year.
Thank you, Charlene. You too.
You are. Thank you.